JT Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley, and I'm delighted to welcome on the show today Dr Marnix Wells from Croydon, south of London in the United Kingdom. His book, HEGUANZITHE DAO of Unity, in the birth of the Chinese emperor, is simply phenomenal. His book is about a young boy growing up in exile, becoming China's first Augustan emperor, Qin Shi Huangzi. The story is set around 250 BC in the China Warring Kingdoms. When you look deeper into the book, you realize that the overriding storyline is about a Pheasant Cap Master, grand unity, and the 9 Augustans, linking politics and philosophy to religion in ancient China. Dr. Marnix describes the storylines in his phenomenal book of his as scheming, ruthless, and idealistic. His interest in ancient Chinese history, art, goes back to his mother's teenage copy of The Importance of Living by Lin Yutang. As a youngster, he loved going onto archaeological digs for county museums. At Oxford University, he obtained his first degree in Chinese and later a PhD from London School of Oriental and African Studies. He worked as a shipping manager in the Far East, where he acquired local knowledge of the people and their heritage. He's given numerous lectures and authored several papers and books. So let's invite him on the show to talk about this outstanding book he's written and a little bit about his fascinating life. Dr. Marnix, come and join me.
Thank you, John. Great to be here in this not so sunny morning, but nice to see you and get a sympathetic ear for what I have to say, which many people may find somewhat unusual.
It's an unusual book, and it's certainly not a book to a bedtime read story. It's a book to learn about ancient China's religion and its cultural history. That's what it's really about, and it's done through this exiled young person, this young boy. Marnix, before we get into this brilliant, absorbing book of yours, who was Qin Shi Huangzi, the Yellow Emperor, the first Augustan emperor, or unified China? Who was he?
Well, this is all a bit of a mystery because most of the records were destroyed after the fall of Qin, which ended in a bit of a holocaust or a inferno when the future Han dynasty took over and put Xianyang, which is the Qin capital, which is very close to what is now Xi'an, in the west part of central China, which along the Yellow River. And the famous Han historian, Sima Qian, he gave a short biography, but most of the details we are dependent only on him because, as I say, so many of the records were destroyed. This is now being remedied somewhat by the discovery of tombs with silk manuscripts miraculously preserved inside from that period. And they show a lot of connections with the HEGUANZITHE, or the Pheasant Cap Master, and his writings, which I estimate in the period from about 250 BC to 221 BC, which was the date in which Qin conquered the last of the 6 kingdoms and started the unified Chinese empire, which in some form has persisted over the last 2,000 years. And they still see this as the foundation of the unified China. Although in mythology, of course, it goes back in their estimation to 5,000 years, which means another 3,000 years before that. However, that is not supported by written records, of course. So it's really the era of mythology and legend. But of course, these ideas, whether true or not, are important for the psychology of a people or a nation, if you like to call it that. But China was not a nation as we know it. It was more an empire, and there's great differences within the country, especially between the north and the south. And the north has generally been dominant, as in this case.
When I think, Marnix, we need to look at the title of the book, The Dao of Unity. Of course, the Dao was the young exiled boy that became, the Yellow Emperor, the first Augustan emperor. For me, Marnix, Daoism is a philosophy, a religion, a way of life that originated in the 6th century BCE in the eastern Chinese province of Henan. At the heart of Daoism teaching, Marnix, I understand there are 4 key ideologies: simplicity, going with the flow, letting go, and harmony. And the Taoist community believe in unity. So this is where the word unity comes into your title. And of course, Daoism, the religion, Dao, this is where it's stemming from. And that nature, not people, controls things. That's what they believe. I understand. Would I be right in my judgment here, my overview? And what's your view around Daoism and the way that it operated back then?
Yes, John, very, very true. It stems from the book of Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was the author of a book called the Tao Te Ching, or Tao Te Ching, which is known all over the world in hundreds of translations. And the curious thing about his book, which probably is what makes it so attractive, is that it's very enigmatic, very brief, and he does spell out a philosophy as you have described. The only question is, in my mind, is exactly who he was. And we know even less about him, actually, than we know about HEGUANZITHE, the Pheasant Cap Master. But what we do know is that he didn't give anything away. He gave no clues. He didn't mention a single proper name of a place or a person. But we believe that he, according to tradition, that he lived maybe about 500 BC, plus or minus, maybe actually a bit later. But the interesting thing for me is, how does it actually relate to the everyday world? How did it relate to the politics? Because everything, probably in China as elsewhere, also has a political agenda or significance or influence. And I think HEGUANZITHE actually may be the answer to this, because he, by contrast with Lao Tzu, who he quotes frequently, without attribution, but nonetheless, obviously he knew the book. But he relates it to every day. He relates it to the politics of a world which is still in turmoil, and which is being threatened by Qin, which was the powerful country or nation to the west of China, which eventually, of course, would engulf all the others. So he's facing this situation where basically were boots on the ground, and he's trying to relate the kind of ideals of Lao Tzu, of unity, to actually the physical, political unity of China, which he hopes to be achieved in a peaceful way, rather than a way by conquest, which is actually, sadly, the way it turned out. But such is the world we live in. Things don't always come up to our ideals. But so in a way, he may have been provided a blueprint for a centralized China based on the idea of nature centered on the pole stars as they saw it, being the center of everything, which is also like the Tai Chi, which is the art which we practice for health and self-defense. But it's all related to that sort of fundamental unity, whether in the body or the universe.
In the books, in the introduction, Marnix, you talk about, Yellow Emperor, Lao Tzu, and Qin, 9 Augustans reincarnated, grand unity, divine luminaries. Can you embellish a little more here so that the listeners and viewers get your viewpoint on these areas of importance that are in your book?
Yes, this was the challenge I faced, because these names or words thrown around in the book are never explained, and one has to extrapolate from the different parts and see whether they will form a coherent whole. And as I see it, the 9 Augustans represent the 9 stars of the plough or the Dipper constellation, the Great Bear. And in Chinese tradition, in Taoism, right to the present, they always saw 7 plus 2 stars. And this is exactly what HEGUANZITHE describes. And these stars are a kind of divine luminaries, which are the actual, maybe the essence of these rulers who rule China. And the 9th one, as I see it, is kind of prophesied to be the one who will fix everything in the very near future. And he was the kind of prototype for the first emperor. So in other words, the first emperor is kind of incarnate with the 9th Augustan. And he actually chose that term Augustan for his name. So Qin, he called himself Qin Shi Huang Di. A Di is kind of like God, and Huang is what I translate as Augustan, which is a kind of throwback to Rome and the first emperor Augustus. But it's also, it also has the kind of spiritual meaning of sort of divine nature. And so this is tying up the idea of the Chinese Empire, the Roman Empire, the kind of mystic idea of empire or unity in the political sense. And this is incarnate in this boy who actually was born in the state of Zhao, which is where this book is centered. And later he managed to get back to Qin and claim the crown. And from there he became the emperor and the conqueror of the whole world, the whole Chinese world at least, and founded the empire. But although it was a political thing, it's also a spiritual thing, because this is not proven, but I think there are a lot of indications that he was actually what we might call a Taoist, although the term Taoism was not actually sort of out there at that time. And a professor at Cambridge has said to me quite brusquely, there was no Taoism before Han Dynasty, which the Han Dynasty being the one that succeeded the Qin. Well, that's a question of definition, but certainly Lao Tzu was around before then. And I think the first emperor was the person who actually put all this into physical form through the empire. And from that, of course, the Han Dynasty just continued, although they disagreed with some of the Qin's more drastic policies. But there we are.
When you look at your book, Marnix, you've split it up into 3 scrolls. You've got the top scroll, the mid scroll, and the bottom scroll.
Correct.
Now, I say to quite a few people on the podcast, the whole idea is to give a flavor, not to go into in depth. So there are lots of things within these scrolls, but we can't go to them all. If you want to know what all the scrolls are about, got an answer for you. Go and buy the book.
Hopefully it's not too expensive.
So let's go to, can we have a look at particular aspects of each scroll, please, Marnix? Let's start with top scroll. But before we start there, I want you to tell people where these scrolls came from. So where they came from, but I want to go to the top scroll first. And I want to go to the section which is going to take me to Heaven Model, pages 54 to 71. Now, when I look at Heaven's Model, you say Heaven's Model is comparable to the ideas of Plato. I thought. To which my research touches on well-being, happiness, high virtue, and right moral action. I thought. You make reference to various constellations, as you've already said, some with 9 stars mirroring the 9 Augustans. So what's the importance of these scrolls? Why have you split them as top, middle, and bottom? And where do they originate from? And Heaven's Model, talk about that one.
Thank you, John. I actually just followed the traditional well, I can't say manuscript. It was printed 1,000 years ago in the Song dynasty, and this is the way it was arranged. What they based that on, I can't say, of course, because there are no surviving scrolls before that. But the the printed version split it into these 3 scrolls. And I would say that the top scroll is basically centered on the state of Zhao, and particularly chapter 7, which is basically facing impending disaster. And I think this follows the route of the Zhao army and the slaughter of the surrendered soldiers, which is about 360 BC, sorry, 260 BC. So that's very much in the present, facing Qin. Of course, Qin is not mentioned, but the interesting thing is there's a kind of taboo in China, whereby you could not mention the personal name of the emperor. And in this case, they always substitute a different word, which means the same thing as his name, which was Zheng, meaning basically government or correctness. Now, the second scroll is more like in the divine realm, where there's a kind of god called Grand Unity and Grand Augustan, and they have a conversation about the ideal world. And they have a kind of blueprint for unification, which is based on the 360-day calendar, which is basically a solar calendar rather than the moon calendar, which was traditional basically. And the uncomfortable thing about that is that it's a very draconian system, because anyone who did not report on time, according to that calendar, would be not only killed, but his family also would basically be exterminated, which obviously doesn't sit very well with our ideas of Taoism or morality.
No.
But that was the way, I'm afraid. And the last bit is a kind of retrospective look at history, tracing the different emperor or kings, I should say, of the past, and basically seeing how different rulers fared. But the Platonic side of it is it's the relation of these values to the stars, because heaven has always been seen as a kind of abstract symbol of values, of what the Plato called ideas or ideals. Now, China has, in popular accounts or even academic accounts, have always tended to downplay the idealistic side of Chinese thought, because they say, well, it's very pragmatic. But in this case, it's very far from pragmatic. It has a pragmatic side and also a humanistic side, but it is also very ideal driven, as one might say that China is today, even when, by practical standards, we would question some of their directions. But as I suppose, as in religions or political philosophies, there is always this conflict between the pragmatic and the ideal.
Absolutely.
So,
let's go to the middle scroll, Marnix. And now I quite like this one. This is why I picked it out. Can we explore royal acts? And this is on pages, everybody, 126 to 157. Again, what's the significance of this section? You liken the royal acts to a Roman fessus. Now, when I looked up what fessus was, it's a bound-up bundle of wooden rods, which sometimes included an axe protruding from the rods within the middle.
right.
So you talk about mandate and punitive empowerment, which I understand refers to restoration of justice. What are you driving at here with putting this bit in?
Well, of course, the first chapter is also talks about this royal axe, and again, no detailed explanation is ever given here. But the underlying message here is not only of the Tao or the way, not only the moral or spiritual Tao, but there is also the word fa. Fa is basically many things, but it can be translated as model. But here it is also very much law, the sense of law which needs to be enforced, and that the axe is always the symbol of the powers of enforcement. The police in our day, or the army, the power of the ruler, which could be pretty drastic.
Oh, indeed.
And so, yes, although Taoism is seen as a very mild and go with the flow type of philosophy, here it is also allied, paradoxically perhaps, to the enforcement of by physical means. which is symbolized by the axe.
Ah. So let's go to the bottom scroll. I'm fascinated with the armed campaign section. You mentioned HEGUANZIThe, explaining how man, by understanding dialectical laws of nature, can adapt them by balance and dynamics to his own advantage. I thought. Would you care to expand and tell the listeners what your thinking is around this philosophical area?
Well, HEGUANZIThe himself gives a very concrete example in the sense of somebody picking up a very heavy pole or beam, and he said if you try to carry it, lift it from the end, then not even a sumo wrestler or the equivalent could lift it. But if you carry it from the middle, then it's quite easy to lift because the two sides balance. And that's a concrete idea. It's an illustration of the power of dynamics, which is a combination. It's a combination of position and forces, balancing forces, you might say, which is the idea of Taiji, I suppose. That you
I chose this section because I wanted to understand as well. That's why I asked it. Now, I wanted just to go to, because when you look at the book, everybody, at the beginning of the book, we've got a lot of photographs headed under plates from 1 to 24. And further on in the book, there are other plates, and particularly on page 285. Why did you choose to put these, pictures, these photographs in? And when I look at them, they're absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Are they there just to back up the book?
They are trying to relate the traditions of Taoism, which is not only philosophy, it's also a kind of religion whereby these stellar gods, these 9 gods from the Dipper constellation or the Plough constellation, if you like, how they are actually not only just stars or abstract ideas, but they're actually seen as got human, embodiments.
I like the plate 12. And, when you look at the image, this is a Southern Song painting, 1250, of the Dippers, 7 stars in priestly white rose with 2, and here we go, 7 and 2. Mustard garden stars in red with high black caps. It's beautiful. And I know it's in black and white. I just wish it was in color. But it's beautiful. And I picked that one up deliberately because it's the 7 and the 2, 9, everybody.
Yes.
What's next for Marnix Wells, both personally and writing? Are there more books coming down the pipeline, Dr. Marnix?
Yes, I have the temple wall paintings of the North Mountain, North Mountain Range, which is a kind of again, it's connected to the North Pole. It's the god of the North, which also has a kind of martial, as well as it's a symbol of the position, the throne on which the emperor sits. And this temple, for some reason, has been very much neglected, and it's got these amazing color paintings, wall paintings, which are like 60 feet high and 90 feet across. And unlike a lot of these, say, Buddhist temple paintings, this one is also very much vibrant, dynamic. There's a lot of sense of movement, which is very. I mean, it's almost like being part of a sort of movie, and I've made a contract with some of the authorities about 20 years ago to publish them and clean them, because they were very, very dirty and dilapidated, which they have now done. And I've just recently received a copy. So that's one thing I would like to write up. And also Chinese music and its relation to lyrics, to poetry, and of course martial arts, Tai Chi, and so forth. So those I've got my hands full. If I live that long.
Who do you see as your market, Marnix, for your books? And more importantly, who would you like to see reading these books of yours? Young, old, mixed people? Because you say this is a book for people who love world history and religion.
Yes, well, I would imagine that would be the prime target. But I mean, of course, I would like as many as possible to kind of understand what I'm talking about. And I'm not sure where academics how they would react. I haven't, unfortunately, received much reaction from the world of academics. Perhaps they resent someone. I'm attempting to kind of bridge the gap between academia and the man in the street. And of course, this is very dangerous, because on the one hand, you get the reaction from maybe many ordinary people saying that, oh, well, this is something outside their interest or their understanding. And on the other hand, you get the academics saying, well, actually, it's all rubbish, and you know, we haven't peer reviewed it, and so forth. But I would welcome any kind of academic challenge, because as you can probably see, I've put in a lot of footnotes to back up what I say, and so if somebody has a different interpretation, that would be great. But I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for the counterblast, as you might say.
Because when you look at your book, yes, you've not only got the English translation, but a fair section of it, you've got the Chinese translation in as well. So that's fascinating, everybody.
Yeah.
Dr. Marnix, where can people get your book from?
Where can they get it? Well, I believe it's in Waterstones and Amazon. So that would probably be the best source. It's also online, I think. So if they Google it, something should come up.
Okay. Dr. Marnix Wells, thank you so much for giving me the great pleasure of interviewing you, chatting to you about your book.
That's great. Thank you, John.
I've certainly learned quite a bit from it, everybody, particularly about deism and unity. And as Dr. Marnix has already said, the link between, the constellation of the Great Bear, 7 and 2, 9 Augustans, and linking it all up to the Roman Empire as well as the Chinese Empire. And it's just been fascinating. But it's not a bedtime read. It's a book to learn about the ancient Chinese culture, religion, philosophy, politics, all linked up through a young boy back in 250 BC.
Thank you, John.
I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you are in the world. So until next time, stay safe.